Hi, I'm Sensei Allison with Code Ninja's Wellesley, back with another video on loops for our JavaScript Computer Science Concepts series. In this video, we're going to be learning about a third form that loops can take in JavaScript. Our third kind of loop is basically backwards while. It's called DoWhile. That's because it first executes the code block and then checks the conditional statement if it should execute again. That's because it first executes the code block, then checks the conditional statement to see if it should repeat. Let's go over the flow of a do-while loop together. First, the computer sees the do keyword. This tells the computer what kind of code to expect next: a code block, and then the while keyword, and then a conditional statement. The computer then begins executing the code block beginning with the opening curly bracket. Finally, the computer reaches the closing curly bracket and the while keyword. It checks the conditional. If the conditional holds true, the computer returns to the opening curly bracket and executes the code block again. If the conditional is false, the computer simply continues to the next line. An important thing to notice here is that do-while loops always execute their code blocks at least once, unlike for and while loops, which have the option of never executing their code block. Let's look at an example. This code divides a number variable by 2 until the number is less than 1. The variable starts by holding the number 100. We'll consider two questions. How many times would this loop execute? What would the variable I hold after each loop iteration? If you're not quite sure what number the I would hold after a certain number of times dividing by 2, you can use a calculator to figure it out. It's no problem. Get your Think Like a Computer hat on and try it out. Here's what I got. So, let's walk through it. The variable declaration here of I'm assigning 100 to the name I divided by equal to 2, which is a fancy way of saying reassign I to itself divided by 2. Then we reach the line of the conditional statement. So this table is different because our previous tables started with 0 times executing the loop, because you evaluated the conditional before you executed the code block. But with this one, we perform the actions in the code block before we evaluate the conditional. So at this point, we've executed the code block once. I is now 50, not 100 as it was originally assigned, and 50 is indeed greater than or equal to 1. The conditional statement is true. We repeat. 50 divided by 2 is 25, so I is now 25, and so on and so forth until I becomes smaller than 1 at 0.78125, and that takes 7 iterations to happen. And at this point we see 0.78 is not greater than or equal to 1, and so we simply continue to the next line. Loops seem pretty powerful, right? We can perform some actions an arbitrary number of times, dependent only on the conditional you wrote being true. Loops are indeed powerful, and that's why you need to be careful about writing your conditional statement, because it's very easy to accidentally write a conditional statement that's never false, so the loop never ends. Never-ending loops can overwhelm and freeze your computer, which is never fun. To prevent your computer from getting stuck in a never-ending loop, take a look at your code before you run it, and pretend to be your computer. Run through the code, and make sure that the code that will turn the conditional to false will actually execute in a reasonable situation. Good loop conditionals check a variable that is eventually altered by the loop's code block statements. This is pretty easy to assure with for loops, since the ending statement takes care of changing the loop counter. It's a little trickier with while and do while, so you gotta be careful. Be sure not to go to the other extreme. A loop with a conditional that's never true is kind of a waste of code. Again, the solution to this is putting yourself in the computer's shoes and checking what values each variable might hold, what things might be true or false, and what operations might happen. So now we've learned 3 kinds of loops in JavaScript together. Feel free to go back to any of the 3 videos outlining the types of loops to make sure you understand how they work and why they're different. And then make sure to come back soon, because in the next video we're going to be going over a real-life use of loops. Thank you. Bye.